Hello YouTube family. Hi. Welcome to my channel. My name is Bianca and I'm super duper excited to have you guys. Today I'm gonna do my makeup for you and I'm going to talk about a true crime story. I know there are quite a few like true crime and makeup channels, which is awesome. Like I've been inspired by them for a while now, but my true crime is gonna be just a little bit different. I'm gonna talk about some exonerations and people who have been wrongfully incarcerated, charged, found guilty, all of that. So we're gonna talk about different cases like that. So if you're interested in hearing about that, about how it goes from start to finish and knowing some of these people's names, because I think their stories really deserve to be told, stay with me. Keep watching. I hope you guys like the content. I hope you like the look. And yeah, I'm not going to take up too much of your time. Let's get started. So the first person that we will be talking about today, his name is Jackie Wilson. Jackie Wilson was born in 1960 in Chicago, Illinois. Jackie has an older brother, Andrew. Mom was in the picture. Dad wasn't really around. And, you know, he had a pretty normal life growing up. But his brother was always kind of getting in trouble. And if you have siblings and you just kind of know, like, when your older sibling is kind of like the rebel, you're more of like an introverted. Your personality naturally becomes kind of introverted in a lot of cases. I'm feeling a little regretful right now. I should have done my eye makeup first since it is going to be dark today. But that's all right. So anyways, his older brother Andrew was kind of like the rebel, so Jackie tried to stay, you know, a little bit more low-key, kind of find his own rhythm out of his brother's shadow, do his own thing, and just be safe. It doesn't really sound like the life of like crime and violence, and just like rebellion was the life for him. And that tends to be the case when people have like older siblings who are kind of the rebels of the family. They tend to be a little bit more introverted. At least that's what I've heard. I'm the oldest of three, and me and my little brothers are literally 15 and 16 years apart. So I was the rebel, but I was kind of raised as like an only child. So anyways, Jackie was like, nah, you want to have a life in the street? It's like, that's cool. You know, you're still my brother. I still love you, but I'm just going to stay out the way, do my thing. So it all takes place on the winter morning of February 9th, 1982. Jackie and his brother Andrew, his older brother Andrew, were in the car driving. 22-year-old Jackie was pulled over by the police. He's kind of having that moment in life that none of us really want to have, where you're driving and police lights go off behind you. Jackie was driving a rust-colored Chevrolet. His brother Andrew was in the passenger seat. The police officers pull these guys over for what reason? I don't know. But, you know, you got people in your life that are just kind of like hotheads, and you need to just be careful with them ones that kind of get in trouble everywhere you go, always cussing people out, always ready to pop off at like any minute. That's how Andrew was. And those are people that you need to be careful of, because they make impulse decisions and they don't always think about who they're going to affect. And if you guys are all in a space together, like, that might not be the best situation for you. But the officers that pull them over, it's like late, it's like 2 a.m. The officers see these guys driving, they pull them over, they go up to the driver's side door and they ask Jackie, like, okay, show me your license and registration. Jackie's like, okay. So he starts looking for his driver's license, but he can't find it. They get pulled over on the far south side of Chicago on like 81st and Morgan. If you're familiar with the city, like, that's where it is. If you're not, it's just south. Just know it's far south. Officers ask Jackie for his information. Jackie's looking for it. He's scrambling through his shit. He's scrambling through his stuff, and then he cannot find his driver's license. And this is like the moment where like he gets a feeling in his stomach like, oh shit, this is not gonna go well. Like, they're gonna arrest him for driving without a license, even though he has a driver's license. He just can't find it on him. And he tells this to the officers. So Officer O'Brien was initially the cop who got out of the driver's side of the cop car walked up to the driver's side of Jackie's car and asked for his identification. Now, when he doesn't have it, he, signals to the other cop like they ain't got their shit. So Officer Fahey gets out. He gets out of the passenger side of the cop car and walks up to the passenger side of Jackie's car, where his older, lovely brother Andrew is there, and he tells Andrew, like, get out of the car. Y'all ain't got y'all shit together, so you need to step out. Instantly, Andrew's like ready to turn up, but he gets out of the car. When Andrew gets out of the car, he has this jacket on, and he takes the jacket off and throws it inside the car. He's getting out on the passenger side. He gets out of the car, takes his jacket off, throws it inside the car, and the officer's like, hello, I just saw you do that. Like, take it out. Let me see what's in the jacket. Andrew takes out the jacket. The officer reaches in the jacket and finds loose bullets. The officer then tells Andrew to put his hands behind his back. He's like, I don't know what y'all on. He ain't got his license. You got these bullets in your pocket. Like, you're under arrest. So when Andrew gets out of the car, he's already like pressed. He's already pissed. And he's feeling like, okay, we're probably going to get arrested, right? He looks across the car and sees that Officer O'Brien is standing there with a gun pointed at Jackie's head. Jackie's standing up against the car. He had just been searched and told them that he can't find his license. So the officer's like, all right, you got to step out of the car. Like, we're going to have to arrest you. You don't got your stuff. So upon getting out of the car, the Officer O'Brien draws his gun and has a gun pointed at Jackie's head. So when Andrew gets out of the passenger side, he knows that he done dropped the jacket in the car. The officer has taken the jacket and found bullets. He looks across. He sees that his little brother is standing there with a gun pointed at his head, ready to be shot and killed. Like, you guys know how this goes. Like, they don't really hesitate all the time. So Andrew has the genius idea. Now, this is why I say you need to be careful with them hotheads, because they make decisions on impulse and they don't always think about everybody that's going to be affected. Granted, in this case, I don't know. What would you actually do if it was a police or anybody that's standing there with a gun pointed at your little brother, your little sister, your daughter, your son? I don't know what you do. But he sees the gun drawn at Jackie's head, and Andrew pretends he's going to put his hands around his back to be arrested. And instead of putting his hands around his own body, he reaches across Officer Fahey and grabs his revolver and shoots him. Doesn't hesitate, doesn't wait, doesn't think about it, nothing. He said, this is it. This is my opportunity. It's either them or it's us. Now, Officer O'Brien already has his gun drawn, right? He already has the gun out. It's already pointed at Jackie's head. So Jackie and Officer O'Brien are both stunned. The sequence of events happened so quickly. Andrew was reaching behind to be arrested, and instead he grabs a pistol and shoots the officer in a matter of seconds. So on the other side of the car, the driver's side, you have Officer O'Brien and Jackie Wilson, who's only a 22-year-old kid. They're both standing there stunned. Both of them instantly drop to the ground and start to shield themselves, and Andrew hops up on the car and shoots Officer O'Brien. Poor Jackie. He's just like this little kid who's hanging out with his brother, and he has not had time to process what has just happened. So he is kind of standing there like in a state of shock, paralyzed, unable to move. He was just driving home with his brother. They were, just riding in the car, listening to their little music, having their little bro bonding time, when they get pulled over by the cops. Next thing you know, he has a gun pointed at his head. Next thing you know, he has 2 dead police officers at his feet. And his brother is sitting there on the other side of the car from the passenger side, screaming at him, yelling at him, Jackie, come on, let's go, get in the car. Like, we can't, we obviously can't stay right here. Like, we need to leave. We need to get going. And Jackie does not come to. He stands there and he is freaked out, and his body is, we all got that kind of flight or fight or freeze response. And it seems that Jackie's response is to freeze, because homeboy was not moving a muscle. Eventually, Jackie comes to his senses and unfreezes and is able to get in the car and drive away. Now, these 2 officers, William Fahey and Robert O'Brien, actually were the 2nd and 3rd Chicago police officers specifically to be killed that week. Just 4 days previous to this shooting happening, there was another young officer that was killed named James Doyle. He was killed in the line of duty just a few days before this incident took place. So Chicago was in a riot when these two officers were discovered. As a matter of fact, earlier that day on February 9th, when this incident happened, the two officers, Robert O'Brien and William Fahey, had actually attended the funeral of their fellow officer who had died a few days before. So this was a really long and awful day for these guys. I mean, they woke up, they went to a funeral for their colleague, and then they were later gunned down by their own weapons in the line of duty. Like that sounds like a really shitty day. That being said, these killings triggered the largest and most violent manhunt in Chicago police history. The police force offered a $10,000 reward for anybody who had any information on the murders. The mayor of Chicago offered a $50,000 reward for anybody who had information that would lead to an arrest. So the total amount of money that was up for grabs at that time was $60,000 for anybody who could come forward with any information. Not only that, a former police officer once said that was on duty during the time of this situation, said that before the police officers, they kind of all huddled up in the office before they all set out to just rampage through the city and find who did this. He said that the energy and the vibe and just like the message that was understood was retaliation and revenge, and to find the answers by any means necessary. And that was kind of like the message and the duty that they were sent off with, to go into the streets and police people. And that's exactly what they did. Over the next 4 days, there were over 100 reports of police brutality on the citizens of the city. They went door to door, neighborhood to neighborhood, busting down people's doors, dragging them out of their houses, beating them up, accusing people of having seen things, just trying to get information, like just doing whatever they had to do to get people to talk. Which I'm like, okay, that is not okay, right? For them to go and be abusive. But there is kind of like, in those communities, there is kind of that, hush hush, like, I didn't see nothing mentality, where like, you don't want to get involved in anything crazy. So people probably were withholding information. I don't know. Makeup did not spill. I'm proud of myself. So 4 days later, on February 13th, with the help of tips from people in the neighborhood after physically assaulting people, the police came across a tip to check a beauty salon. When the police raided the salon, they were able to actually uncover the 2 revolvers that belonged to the officers and some other hefty, sketchy, questionable evidence, including the rust-colored Chevrolet that Jackie was driving that night. The police also uncovered a handgun that belonged to a person who was a security guard of a McDonald's that was actually murdered just a month before. So they found this dead person's handgun along with these 2 dead officers' handguns, along with the car. So, I mean, seems pretty like open and shut, case closed, right? The owner of the beauty salon said that Andrew Wilson had been staying there for some time, and so police pretty much felt like, all right, well, we cracked the case, like, let's go get these guys. The next day after the salon was raided, on February 14th, Valentine's Day of 1982, the 2 gentlemen were arrested. They were found in separate locations. The police officers held a press conference where they proudly announced, we found substantial evidence, we have witnesses, and on top of that, these 2 flipped on each other. They told each other's involvement in this shooting and exactly what happened, and these guys are guilty and we're gonna lock them up. Everybody rest assured, we found the murderers. They're going away. It's actually interesting because the handgun that was found in the salon that belonged to the security guard that was murdered, a month before, is actually tied to another case that I'll be discussing next, and his name is Alton Logan. So if you want to find out how these 2 are connected and how these 2 cases like severely impact each other, catch my next video. It's gonna be good. So this case seems pretty pretty like open and closed, right? It seems pretty like, you know, these guys did it. They found the weapon. They got the information. They're going to jail. Like, so they both confessed, right? They both confessed to police. What's the holdup on the case? Like, what went wrong? Let me tell y'all, Chicago police got a crazy, crazy history. They had a witness testimony of a man named Tyrone Sims who was awake and happened to live right on the street on the block of where that happened, and he said he could see everything from his window, like clear as day. This is how we got the details of the story of what happened, because Tyrone was watching the whole thing take place. He saw the officers, he saw Andrew's face, he saw Jackie's face, he saw, you know, the whole altercation with the jacket and the bullets and the everything. Like, he saw everything that took place. And, you know, he had came forward and gave a statement and let people know and let police know that, like, hey, these are the guys you're looking for, this is what happened. So in January 1983, the brothers are going to trial. Of course, they were given an all-white jury in a crime where, you know, the defendants are all black and the victims are all white. Their defense tried to appeal the jury and, you know, get a new one, but that request was denied by the judge. They had a police crime specialist who testified that the bullets recovered from the bodies of the two officers did in fact come from Officer Fahey's gun. Detectives testified that they, you know, arrested the brothers, they interrogated them, and eventually they both confessed. So on February 4th of 1983, after a month-long trial for the gentlemen, the jury found them both guilty of murder and armed robbery of the two Chicago police officers. Andrew Wilson was sentenced to death, and Jackie was sentenced to life without parole. However, in April of 1987, just 4 years later, the Supreme Court actually reversed Andrew Wilson's sentencing and ordered a new trial for him, saying that there was no proof that he was not coerced into confessing. With that, they also ordered Jackie a new trial, saying that he should have never been tried with Andrew in the first place. They should have had two separate trials. And so they granted both of the men 2 new trials. Now that seems kind of bizarre. Like, why out of the blue would they all of a sudden say, like, oh, there's no proof that they weren't coerced into, you know, admitting to these crimes. So Andrew was retried with the same witnesses, same everything, and he was sentenced to life without parole this time. Same thing with Jackie. Now, upon being arrested, this is Andrew Wilson's account of what happened to him next. Andrew claims that upon being arrested, he was immediately kicked onto the ground and told, "You're the one who murdered these cops. You're the one who's going to jail for this." The police take Andrew down to the station. They were arrested in separate locations, so when they're taken down to the station, they're immediately thrown into 2 separate rooms. Andrew states that as soon as he walked into the interrogation room, the police officers put a black bag over his head and began beating him in the ribs and in the stomach with phone books. Now, y'all might not remember phone books, or if you're young enough, you might not have ever even seen one, although I think they still send some of them out today in like certain areas of the world. But phone books are like dictionaries. They're like super thick, full of paper, like think printing paper packs, but like 2 of them together would make like a phone book. So they're extremely heavy and hard. And so this is what Andrew says police immediately started hitting him with. They started hitting him in the head, they were hitting him in the ribs and his stomach, on his arms. While they were doing this, they were punching him, you know, all over his body. They were beating him up. They were whooping his ass. So there was an officer in particular his name was Officer Burge. And Officer Burge had a reputation, okay? They would often call him Burge and his bullies because he was known for his hands-on approach for getting people to confess. After they have begun the beating and continued the beating, Williams was refusing to confess. He's like, no, I'm not about to say that I murdered 2 cops so that y'all can hang me out to dry. Like, I'm not gonna do that. Upon him refusing to confess, Burge told one of the officers, you know what, let's take him out to the staircase and just say that he was resisting arrest and being, you know, trying to escape and being aggressive towards us, and let's just kill this, you know what they called him. I'm gonna give, I guess, kind of like a trigger warning. I'm gonna give you guys some graphic details about what happened to Andrew next by the police officers, and it's not pleasant. So if you have a weak stomach or you can't fathom the idea of like harsh punishment and abuse, skip ahead or maybe cancel out of this video because it's about to get pretty bad. When Andrew refused to confess, officers then, now this is like back in 1982 and the buildings were different. So there was a furnace. There was a furnace in the interrogation room. The officers handcuffed Andrew around the furnace so that his arms were wrapped around it, so that he was basically hugging the furnace. Now, his arms, of course, are not long enough to reach all the way around the furnace, but with handcuffs, you know, linking them, there's space in between. And so his whole entire torso is rubbed up against the furnace at this point. And they had him take his shirt off so that his body is directly on the furnace. And this is causing burns to start to happen and appear all over Andrew's torso, all over his chest, his stomach, his arms are covered in burns, and he's screaming in pain. And while this is happening, the officers are continuing to punch him, kick him, beat him up. These are all things that Andrew vividly recalls. So after this happens, the officers are like, all right, we can't like leave all these marks on him. So they're like, you know, we gotta do something about this. So the officers actually have a nurse come in to take care of Andrew's burns, his wounds. They instruct the nurse to pour a liquid onto Andrew's genitals that will have sort of like the same effect as like acid would. It kind of just instantly starts to burn him and burn his skin, and he is screaming in pain. Now the nurse does, you know, address his wound, but she also puts this liquid on him that causes some pretty severe damage to his genital area. This is going on day 2 now of endless torture that that this man has endured trying to get him to confess. Meanwhile, there are 3 other rooms adjacent to this room, and Andrew can hear them doing the same exact thing to Jackie. And so when he hears Jackie on the opposite side, he loses it. And that's at the point where they start to take his, you know, punishment to a harsher level. So there are three people from this particular case that claim that these officers tortured them. There's Jackie, there's Andrew, and there's one of the witnesses that testified, not Sims, who was watching from his window, who actually did see the whole thing go down. There was another man named Donald White, and he claimed that they coerced a witness testimony out of him, and then he said that he received the same thing that he received, being beaten with phone books, a bag placed over his head. He could hear other people begging, screaming, pleading for their life, begging them not to kill them. All 3 men also said that the officers took all the, you know, bullets out of the gun except for one, and told them, we're going to play Russian roulette. They said the officers put the guns in their mouth. He, you know, put it back and forth, moved it all around. He swirled it around their mouths, kind of like a sexual motion with the way that he was putting the gun in and out of their mouths. He would swirl it around, you know, so their heads were just like bobbing and moving, and telling them like, we're just gonna shoot you, or we're gonna push you out this window and then you'll be dead. And then what? Like, so you better tell us what you know, what you saw, if you get what I'm saying. They also had Mr. White's brothers in some of the other rooms, and they were coercing witness testimonies out of them. So Donald White, he said, you know what? At that point, I was willing to do anything because they were beating me up. They were beating my brothers. I thought that they were going to kill me. I thought that they were going to kill them. And so, yeah, I said that I saw what happened, even though I didn't see what happened. Because at that point, I would have done anything to get the beatings to stop. All of this came out in a February 1989 trial when Andrew Wilson filed a class action lawsuit against Burge and his bullies, the other detectives and officers who were involved in the torture that happened. everybody who knew about the torture and didn't speak about it, and I'll name all of them in just a second. And this became a civil rights trial. So in the first trial, a burn expert testified that the burns on Andrew's body were not that they weren't from the radiator. In fact, they weren't even burns, they were abrasion. Police claimed that the radiator in the interrogation room didn't even work, so how could they have possibly tied him up and burned him? All of the other officers denied the allegations. In March 30th of 1989, the jury found in favor of the detectives. However, they were not able to reach a verdict, and so a mistrial was declared. The retrial was conducted that same summer. This time, they found that the burns on Andrew's body were in fact burns, but they were self-inflicted, and they corroborated that with a story that one of Andrew's cellmates told him, where he said that Andrew told him that he inflicted the burns on himself. But we all know that, you know, you can pretty much get inmates to say anything to get a little bit of time off their sentence. And so at the end of the day, they were changing their story up again and saying, okay, fine, they're burns, but we didn't do it, he did it. Meanwhile, Jackie was going through another trial of his own where they acquitted him of the murder charge, but kept the armed robbery, and he was still sentenced to life without parole. So although the brothers had made these allegations and they were receiving some, you know, media attention and media coverage, some people knew or like had some knowledge about what the brothers were saying and what they were accusing the officers of. But it really didn't get that much attention until January of 1990, when John Conroy, a reporter for the Chicago Reader, which was an alternative newspaper in the city, but it was prominent. It had a pretty big following. He published a lengthy article entitled House of Screams. The article detailed for the first time in great detail and in a public, you know, on a public platform, the details of just torture that was endured by several inmates and several people who were convicted, not just the Wilson brothers, but several others. It all started with an anonymous letter to the People's Law Office, which actually was the office that represented Andrew Wilson in the civil lawsuit, which then led them to a man named Anthony Holmes, who had been convicted of a murder and who also said that he had been tortured as well. Holmes then provided a roster of inmates, a list that totaled 50 inmates who had been tortured by these same Chicago officers and detectives. Not only that, the men claimed that there were several people who knew about the torture who could have stopped it and chose not to, or looked the other way, or acted like it never happened. In 1991, Burge was suspended, and eventually in 1993 he was fired. Now the Chicago police, they were getting all type of, you know, negative publicity now from this article that had come out that is accusing them of torturing folks. They were getting attention from the mayor, they were getting attention from the president, they were getting, you know, attention from, of course, the citizens of Chicago that are like, what is this that they're talking about? Why are there so many people with such identical stories who have never met each other saying over the course of all these years that you guys were inflicting insane torture tactics on their bodies and on, you know, getting them to confess to things that, you know, they might not have done. In 1997, a federal judge assessed a $1 million judgment against the city of Chicago in favor of Andrew Wilson. Now, Andrew was guilty of the murder, and he was in police custody. I mean, he was in, you know, he was a person of the state, so he was never going to see this money. $900,000 of it went to his defense. The other $100,000 of the lawsuit went to the families of the two officers that were murdered by Andrew Wilson in a wrongful death lawsuit that they had actually filed years before this came out and happened. And so upon, you know, winning the lawsuit and receiving all the money, that's exactly where it went. And rightfully so. I mean, that, you know, that seems right. In 2003, the Illinois governor, George Ryan, actually pardoned 4 other men who had claimed they had also been tortured by the same team of detectives and officers, citing that they were actually innocent of their crimes. Their names were Aaron Patterson, Leroy Orange, Madison Hobley, and Stanley Howard. In 2006, after spending $17 million and reviewing almost 150 cases later, the special prosecutor reported that in 3 cases, including that of the Wilson brothers, there was sufficient evidence to prove that 5 Burge detectives did in fact torture the defendants. But because the statute of limitations had expired, nobody was arrested. In August of 2009, after years of political and legal fighting, the Illinois Torture Inquiry Relief Commission was established to review claims of defendants and to make recommendation for judicial review if those claims had merit. So a committee to police the police, essentially, and to make sure they ain't out here doing this fuck shit again. This was just established in 2009. That's only, what, 11 years ago? 12 years ago? In 2010, Detective Burge was convicted and sentenced to only 4.5. He was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison. Mind you, Jackie Wilson and Andrew Wilson were arrested in 1983. And this is 2009. They had already served over 20 years in prison. And Officer Burge, an officer of the law who took advantage of his badge and had 150 cases against him, had 50 counts and 4 exonerations due to his abuse of power and his torture that he inflicted on these people, was only sentenced to 4.5 years in prison, when every single person served longer than that. In 2015, the Torture Commission reviewed Jackie Wilson's case, and they found that it had merit, and they recommended it go, under jurisdiction review. In 2018, Cook County Circuit Judge William Hook issued a 119-page ruling granting Jackie Wilson a new trial on the grounds that he had been tortured. This is in 2018, people, 3 years ago. On June 2018, Judge Hooks ordered that Jackie be released on bond. In September of 2020, just last year, just almost a year ago exactly, Jackie went on trial for the 3rd time. This time he chose to have his case decided by Judge Hicks instead of by a jury. After hearing all of the evidence, the witness testimonies, and the claims made on behalf of Jackie and his brother Andrew, in December of 2020, just 3 months later, Judge Hooks granted Jackie Wilson a certificate of innocence. And just this past June of 2021, Jackie Wilson filed a civil rights lawsuit against Detective Burge and his bullies, as well as numerous other people, including the former Chicago Mayor Richard Daley. I'm gonna read you guys a little excerpt of what Judge Hooks found out and claimed when he declared Jackie innocent. So he said, the plaintiff's torture, wrongful prosecution, and false imprisonment occurred and continued because command personnel in the Chicago Police Department, successive superintendents of police, and several mayors of the city of Chicago, most notably former Mayor Richard Daley, as well as Cook County, its state's attorney, and its state's attorney's office, all concealed and suppressed their knowledge of ongoing torture and physical abuse under Burge, blocked and undercut all efforts to expose, discipline, and prosecute offending officers, and refused to intervene to stop the continuing egregious and criminally unconstitutional misconduct. That is Louis, you guys. That is my baby. He's always where I am, and you'll probably see him in lots of my videos. He's just always around. He went on to say the abhorrence of basic rights of suspects by Mr. Burge and his underlings have been costly to the taxpayers, the wrongfully convicted, and worst of all, dozens of victims and their families who have suffered untold grief, in many cases a 30-plus year horror history. In Wilson's civil rights trial, there were 16 units, including all of those that were just named. Jackie says he continues to live under the effects of the isolation, the incarceration, and the depression. He continues to live under the stigma of a cop killer, even though he never actually killed any cops. Additionally, he says that he continues to suffer egregious pain and suffering. There's physical scars and physical damages that were left to his body after, of course, PTSD. There were also all types of physical reminders all over his body of what happened to him, from his wrongful prosecutions, his convictions, his imprisonment, all the time that he lost with his family, all the wounds that he suffered. I mean, can you imagine? It's just like so many things. He spent roughly 26 years in jail wrongfully, and that was after he endured all of the torture by these officers. Upon being released, he said, you know, it's been a long time coming. He said, I'm not mad, but I'm still suffering, and that's something that's gonna remain with me for the rest of my life. Andrew Wilson, on the other hand, this guy, he actually passed away of natural causes in 2017, and upon his death was leaked information tied to another person who was wrongfully convicted. And that's why I said these cases are so connected. This one and then the one that I'm going to do next, his name is Alton Logan. If you guys want to find out about his imprisonment and his incarceration and his exoneration and also how it's tied to these guys, watch my next video. It's an interesting story, and it's crazy just how things work. I actually didn't even mean to do that on purpose. I've been researching cases. I have been preparing for this channel for a while, and so I wanted to have multiple episodes ready to go, and it just so happened that these were connected, and it was just like, what? Flint Taylor, he is an American human and civil rights activist. He's also an attorney from the People's Law Office, which is based out of Chicago. He has litigated many high-profile cases of police violence, government misconduct, and death penalty cases as well. He was also one of the attorneys on Jackie Wilson's case. I'm mentioning him because he recently wrote a book called The Torture Machine, and it just documents the history of police violence and assassination in Chicago. So if you're interested in learning more about this topic, I would highly recommend you check out that book. I can link it below, as well as, I forgot to say this in the beginning of my video, but all of like my makeup materials and products that I use will also be listed below. And that is that. I want to know, what do you guys think? How did you guys like this story? Do you guys like this content? How do you feel about this story? What do you think about Jackie's involvement? I feel like there's gonna be like some confliction, right? Because he was there and he was technically involved, but he was really kind of like an innocent bystander, in my opinion. He was kind of in the wrong place, wrong time, just like those two officers. Like, they were all caught off guard with this one kind of reckless person who, you know, doesn't seem to have a lot of stability, maybe has a lot of anger, and just kind of like flies off the handles. And I think that we all kind of know somebody like that in our life, and you just got to be careful of where you are and when you're with these people, and just be wary of, you know, other people's intentions or lack thereof. Yeah, how do you guys feel about the committee being formed to police the police and make sure that they're no longer doing this, and all of the people who turned a blind eye, and Andrew Wilson, who is a loose cannon and was a loose cannon and caused all of this turmoil and heartbreak for so many people, so many families. I mean, this isn't even the worst of the worst that he has done, and you will find out more in the next video, but as it relates to that case. But tell me what you guys think. If you guys like this look, if you guys like this makeup look, let me know your thoughts. I recently dyed my hair. It's like definitely more red than it was. This started off as being like a pumpkin orange, and now it's kind of turned into this like strawberry color. I don't know. I kind of like it though. Anyways, let me know how you guys like the content, or if you don't, I'm open to suggestions. But if you do, I highly suggest you subscribe to my channel so that you can get more of this content as you so please. Thank you guys for your support. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.